I have three stories to tell today. First, I will tell how I reclaimed or revitalized Christianity through the mysterious processes of our church. I will share some of what it means for me to identify as Christian. Second, I will share what I learned about myself and our church by starting a Christian fellowship group. And third, I will share a vision for what I imagine First Unitarian Church could become as it relates to Christians and Christianity. All three of these stories start with the invitation of a close friend and with an amazing re-welcome of a loving group of people, the people of this congregation. The invitation happened more than 2 years ago when a longtime friend of mine moved back to the Des Moines area and invited me to attend this church with him. As I thought about attending this church again, after more than a decade of being absent, I was nervous. And honestly, my highest hope was to simply survive what I imagined would be an ordeal. But to my unexpected amazement, I experienced an incredible re-welcoming by the people of this church, an experience that continues to change my life for the better. Let me tell you about that welcome. The first person to greet me was David Proudfit. Now, I had known David fairly well when I was a part of this church before, but we had not kept in touch. Yet, David welcomed me as if I had been in church just the week before and had been gone only 7 days rather than 10 years. Then Chauncey Bittner welcomed me, and the two of us easily engaged in comfortable conversation for more than 10 minutes. I also received a warm welcome from Reverend Stringer, Moira Lou, Lori Emma Sinclair, as well as others. As a result of feeling so welcomed, I found myself wanting to attend this church again. So I attended the following week and the week after and the week after and just kept on attending. In the fall of 2013, I became a member of this church for the second time. Over the first months, all was going really well with my second time of being a member of this church. I joined the Soul Matters group, got involved with Energy and Justice for All, attended Amos, pagan, and humanist meetings. In short, I was deeply involved, and so much was so sweet. But then I noticed something that bothered me, and I've spoken about this before. I became aware that I sometimes heard comments that I considered unkind, unfair, or untrue about Christians and Christianity. At first, I said nothing, but over time I decided to speak out about this because it seemed not only unjust to me, but also because it did not seem to reflect the best of Unitarian Universalist theology. While hearing these comments was unpleasant to me, looking back, I now see the discomfort that I experienced as being a necessary first step for my being able to reclaim or revitalize Christianity. So in that sense, I am grateful for even these unpleasant experiences. The second step in my journey was my starting to question why such comments bothered me. After all, if I agreed with these comments, I perhaps would not even notice them. If Christianity were irrelevant to me, I would ignore them. But since I did notice these comments, and since they did bother me, I started to wonder if this could possibly mean that I was open to exploring Christian faith again. Perhaps I had just allowed my Christian faith to lay dormant like agricultural lands that benefit from years of growing no crops. As a way to test this idea, I read the Christian Testament from cover to cover on a daily basis over the period of a month. I read it with new eyes, willing to question, willing to reject, willing to believe. I read the Bible in the same way I had read the entire Quran a couple months earlier, seeking to be open to the point of risking conversion, as Karen Armstrong, author of The History of God and an expert on studying world religions, suggests is necessary to understand the insights of any religion. As I read the stories of Jesus, I was compellingly inspired by the love and compassion Jesus showed each person he met. I was in awe of how Jesus turned many of the values of the domination systems of his day totally upside down. I saw that Jesus loved those people that others rejected and considered unlovable, and correspondingly, Jesus challenged those in power who sought to keep these injustices in place for their own benefit. I noticed that as a spirit-filled mystic, Jesus lived in close relationship with God and attracted followers with his contagious love and audacious vision of what the world could be like if we lived out the message that he came to teach us. In response, I found myself wanting to recommit my life to living inspired by how Jesus lived. To support this intention, I started to practice some Christian spiritual disciplines, such as reading the Bible and praying each day. I've been finding that reading the stories of the Bible and contemplating on them inspires me to be a better human being. While I do not know if my prayers are of value to others, I know this: these prayers are slowly changing me. For example, I've learned that it is quite difficult to stay upset with someone whom you lift up in prayer seeking good for that person. In addition, I find prayer a great resource in sorting through my own thoughts and gaining clarity about decisions that I must make in my life. Each night as I lay in bed reflecting on the day, I offer prayers of thanksgiving for the many wonderful experiences of the day. In this way, prayer increases my sense of gratitude, strengthens my relationship with God, and increases the space for God to work in my life. On a more personal and existential level, I feel a great burden of my heart lifted as I have been able to find an authentic way to reconnect with the Christianity of my boyhood. As I told my son just a couple weeks ago when we were talking, this time my Christianity is not the naive and innocent acceptance of a boy who did not know there were other possibilities. No, this time my Christianity is an informed Christianity, fully aware of the criticisms and attacks some launch. It is a Christianity that seeks to learn from many sources and desires to live in a community that values a widely diverse array of faith perspectives and in which all are welcome. The second story I will tell is what I learned about myself and this church as a result of starting a Christian fellowship group. One thing I learned about myself is that I am a person of courage. I say this as it is probably not difficult for any of you to imagine that it takes courage to speak up about Christianity and about being a practicing Christian here at First Unitarian Church. I also learned that my longing and unmet need for Christian fellowship sometimes got in the way of my ability to effectively lead the fledgling Christian fellowship group. Most of all, though, what I learned about First Unitarian Church as it relates to Christianity is that right now, anyway, there are not enough people interested in supporting a Christian fellowship group for such a group to be viable. After mourning the loss of the hope for a Christian fellowship group here at First Unitarian, I realized that I still experienced a longing for Christian fellowship. So I decided, if there weren't enough First Unitarians interested in a Christian fellowship group, then I would go to where the Christians are. So for the past 4 months, I have continued my participation in First Unitarian Church, though I have pulled back on some of my involvements, and I have added involvements in 2 Christian churches, Grace United Methodist and Plymouth United Church of Christ. At Grace Methodist, I attend worship services and an adult Sunday school class of more than a dozen members who discuss Christian faith and social justice issues. The members of this group engage in lively conversation and know how to disagree with one another without becoming disagreeable. At Plymouth, I sometimes attend their Saturday evening services, which in a modern way is modeled on how early Christian house churches may have worshiped. In both of these churches, I have experienced an easy welcome, participate in the mysteries of communion services, and enjoy hearing sermons that encourage me to live my life out of the upside-down nature of the kingdom of God that Jesus calls us to. What I'm telling you is that I have found ways to meet my longing for Christian fellowship, and that this is being a sweet, sweet experience. I can tell you that meeting my longings for Christian fellowship in other churches helps me to be a better member at this church, because I realize I can no longer expect all of you to try to meet a longing I experience that you likely have no authentic capacity to meet or desire to meet. As you perhaps imagine, I say that with a certain degree of sadness, and at the same time joyfully and gratefully affirm that I do experience amazing, yet markedly different types of spiritual blessings as I participate in the First Unitarian Church here in Des Moines. The third story that I will tell you is the story of a vision I ask members of our church to consider living into as it relates to Christians and Christianity. As I hope is clear by now, I am advocating unashamedly and unabashedly that First Unitarian Church provide an uncommon and extravagant welcome for all who seek to build our church, including Christians. In fact, in a moment of enthusiasm, I imagined a goal of there being 50 Christians in a Christian fellowship church group in this church. Pretty unlikely to happen, right? Yet my faith teaches that with God, all things are possible. And though I've not experienced this, I understand that other Unitarian Universalist churches do support Christian fellowship groups as part of their congregational life, so why not here? If we could break into discussion groups right now, I would ask us to discuss a series of questions something like this. What impact does this vision of having 50 practicing Christians as members of our church have on you? Does it scare you? Does it excite you? Can you see problems about it? Could you see benefits? How would it change our church if we had 50 practicing Christians? After all, we say that each new member does not simply join our church, but also reconstitutes it through involvement in the life of our congregation. I hold this vision for our church in the hope that Christians who may participate in the life of our church in the future will find support for their Christian faith right here in our congregation. My vision is that going forward, Christians will experience a theological welcome in our congregation in the same way that others do, and respectful of the faith perspectives that others share, be able to share how Christian faith inspires them. I imagine others in this church hearing and valuing and learning from these experiences and being comfortable in doing so. I'm happy to report that based on my efforts to start a Christian fellowship group in this church, I honestly believe that most members of this church believe it is true that Christians are theologically welcome here at First Unitarian Church. After hearing the spotlight moment that I presented in the fall of 2014, in which I announced the start of the Christian fellowship group, dozens of church members spoke to me after the service and in the weeks that followed to share their thoughts. Many of you made comments like this: I'm not Christian, so I won't be attending your group, but I'm happy to see that you are starting this group and I wish you well with it. Others said, I'm not Christian, but I value the freedom I have to practice faith in the way I understand it, and I want others to enjoy that same freedom. Yet others said, I'm not Christian, but I was raised Christian, and I appreciate what I learned about living in an ethical and moral way in the Christian church of my youth. One person told me, for decades, I have thought Unitarians have thrown the baby out with the bath as it relates to Jesus and Christianity. I have never quite understood that. Several people said to me, sometimes when I have been involved in groups in this church, I have heard people speak unkindly about Christians. I don't like it, and I never say anything, but it just doesn't feel right to me. So why do all of these comments I have heard over the past 2+ years as it relates to Christians and Christianity matter? They matter because what we think and say we act on, both consciously and subconsciously, and we seek to bring into reality. If we believe Christians are not theologically welcome in our congregation, we will find ways to make the Christians who do attend feel unwelcome, realize that they are in the wrong church, and go away of their own accord. In fact, since I have been speaking about my re-energized Christian faith, in spite of all the support that I've received, there have also been times when I've wondered if I were welcome in this church. In our opening words, John Royal quoted William Schultz as saying, "Come into this place of prophecy and power and let its vision change your heart." With our church's increased commitment to social justice, I suggest that one of the most important social justice decisions we make as a church is the intentionality with which we are aware about whom we welcome in our congregation and about whom we may be knowingly or unknowingly driving away. In my opinion, and from my experiences and observations, I think we may well struggle the most in knowing how to welcome Christians. Sometime in the near future, our church plans to revisit our end statement. Perhaps this would be a good time to think about what it means for our church to be a welcoming church in the fullest meaning of that phrase. In my understanding of Unitarian Universalist theology, I believe our church offers the strongest theological support of any church for us to be the most welcoming, most inclusive, most arms open wide of any church anywhere. Let's take a quick look at our UU principles. Our first principle affirms the inherent worth and dignity of every person. Our second calls for justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. Our third promises an acceptance of one another and an encouragement to spiritual growth. Our fifth asserts that each person enjoys a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. Let's take a quick look at our sources of our faith. These include the living tradition which we share, including direct experiences of the transcending mystery and wonder, words and deeds of prophetic women and men, and wisdom from the religions of the world, including Jewish and Christian teachings, humanist teachings, and spiritual teachings of earth-centered traditions. To me, our UU theology is much like the Iowa weather. It offers the full 4 seasons and great change from week to week. This means that each person who joins us, at least some of the time, will hear theological perspectives that they value the most. For example, this week, the focus is on our relationship with Christians. Next week, the focus will be on our relationship with pagans. So what might our welcome statement read like? I can say my theology of welcome in 3 words. Words that I borrow from the welcome statement of Plymouth Church. All are welcome. This means that Democrats, independents, libertarians, conservatives, socialists, Green Party, and Republicans are welcome. This means that people of all races and cultures are welcome, and that people of all sexual orientations and gender identities are welcome. People of all financial means are welcome. People who may experience special physical and mental health needs are welcome. And it means that we welcome people from an amazingly wide diversity of faith perspectives. And we seek to learn and grow from the amazing opportunity we all enjoy to engage in creative interchange because of this diversity. No creeds to affirm, unless you choose to. No theological gauntlets to run through, or, even better, no theological gauntlets to force another person to run through. Just simply, all are welcome who desire to join with us and to work to build up this joyful community of faith. To me, this is what it means to be an alternative church. Not a church that is an alternative to a Christian church because Christians are not welcomed, but a church that welcomes all, including Christians, regardless of their human situations. At its best, our church acts on the understanding that even though our members may disagree theologically, we do not need to fear these differences, for we can all stand on the side of love together. As Christine Organ, member of Countryside UU Church in Palatine, Illinois, writes in the summer 2015 edition of UU World magazine, "We have all come to this faith from different places, and though we share certain religious commonalities, we continue to walk on a multitude of spiritual paths. That is part of the beauty of Unitarian Universalist faith. We don't just accept our differences, we honor and celebrate them." In accepting the Arthur Ashe Award for Courage this past Wednesday at the ESPY Awards, Caitlyn Jenner spoke eloquently and powerfully about the urgent need to love and support our transgendered and transgendering brothers and sisters. I agree with her entirely about this. And I also think her words apply fully as well as we work to build this community of faith. It's about all of us accepting one another, Caitlyn said. We are all different, and that's not a bad thing. That's a good thing. Here at First Unitarian Church, may we be open to change, even uncomfortable change, to not only be more welcoming of Christians, which I believe may be our greatest welcoming challenge, but to learn to become more welcoming to all who walk through our doors, no matter what their human situation. In closing, I would like to reprise the metaphors of this service. That of a welcoming table, that of a best meal that includes saying thanks for our blessings, and that of engaging in acts of showering the people with love. With these metaphors in mind, let us be ever growing our capacity to invite others to our welcoming table. Let us work together to create the best meal, the best congregation we can, understanding that creating this meal and this congregation is about more than eating good food. It's about working together, sharing our lives, sharing our gratitude, and sharing laughs. Let us shower all of the people who come to our church with love. Let us be both a community that values and respects each person's beliefs, and let us be a community completely beyond belief. Amen.